Jacob, that seeks your face, O God of Jacob. God, I just pray that that would be true, that we would be a generations, or that we would all be generations of just a people that seek you, God, that we would not seek the things of this world, but that we'd be seeking you and seeking your truth. And I just pray that in this time that we would, that would be our prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.
Let me ask you, have you ever had an appointment in your life and you realized that the appointment was happening after it had already started? You remembered it all of a sudden that you were supposed to be somewhere and you were not there. You were maybe relaxing in bed or eating breakfast or something else, and there was an appointment that you had and you weren't there. Anybody ever had that? Okay, how does that feel? Bad. How about it? I mean, has it ever been an important appointment? Yeah, I've had a few of those even in the last few months. But I remember maybe one of my most memorable appointments was there was when I was going to seminary. In the morning, I would go to school. In the afternoon, I would ride the bus. I'd work as a carpenter for till 5, 6 at night, and there was this girl that I really liked in seminary. One of 3 girls in a school of 1,000 or so. So it was a lot of competition there for the girls' attention. But I asked this girl out on a date, and she told me she lived up in the mountains in Evergreen. And so I told her I would be there on Friday night and pick her up. And then I drove my car to work, and the car, when I got to work, it died. So my car was dead at work, and this was before the cell phone situation, and I had no number, except I had her address. And so then I had to work late. I was supposed to be there at 7, and I didn't get off till 6. And when I got off, I had no transportation. And I thought this girl could be my future. And there was this appointment. And I wasn't going to make the appointment. And even though I knew about the appointment, I wasn't going to make the appointment. So I asked my boss, can I borrow something? He said, well, you can borrow my truck for the weekend. So he let me borrow the truck. But I was still so late and I couldn't call her. And so I started heading up to the mountains, even though I'd never been there before, to this place. And it was back in the mountains somewhere. And as I was driving, I realized I'm wearing this shirt that cut off sleeves, right? I'm all sweaty, I'm all dirty, I've got ragged stuff on, right? So this is a great way to impress someone, I thought. But I said, well, at least I got to show up. And so I'm driving up there, and I got to a certain point, and I couldn't find it after that. So I got out of the car, I started knocking, and it's dark now, up in the mountains, knocking on doors, asking if anybody knew where I live. And amazingly, it took me about an hour and a half, but I actually got there. Like 2 hours late, wearing ragged stuff. And she did go out with me that night. But I knew that was going to be the last time she'd ever go out with me. But I kept on trying for about 6 months or 8 months, and finally she went out with me again. But that first one wasn't helpful. Actually, she married me after that, at some point after that. But it wasn't because I showed up on the right time at the right place. But today I want to talk about even more important than that is you want to be connected with God, right? God gave us this time from the time we were born and we came to Christ till the time we die or we're gone to heaven. That's the time we can do something. After that, we just look back and say, hey, look what I did or what I didn't do. And God gave us this time, and we want to figure out a way to be connected with him. So the good thing is tonight, as we look at John chapter 4, we're going to at least get some clues, get some steps on how it is that we can stay connected with God, and we can be we can be on time for the date that he has with us, right? So John chapter 4, it starts out this way. As a matter of fact, in John chapter 1, Jesus met this guy named, what is the guy's name again? It starts with an N. Nathaniel. Met this guy named Nathaniel, and Jesus told him. He said, I saw you when you thought I didn't see you. And Nathaniel was so impressed. He said, man, okay, I'm going to follow you. You must be the Messiah. And Jesus said, you're impressed with that? if you stay with me, you're going to see the connection from heaven to earth open, and you're going to be able to stay connected with God. Just follow me, and you're going to see greater things than that. And so now as we go through John, we start to see how we can be connected with God. And that's what's the amazing thing about this story in John chapter 4. And here's the way it starts out. It said, therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself did not baptize his disciples, he left Judea and departed again to Galilee. But he needed to go through Samaria. So this is Jesus, and when he started to realize that a lot of the religious leaders were they were starting to get upset because he was competing with them, and he was winning. So he said, okay, I don't want to make too much of a ruckus. I want to get out of town. I'm going to leave here, and I'm going to leave Judea, that's southern Israel. I'm going to go to northern Israel, Galilee. And really, the whole time Jesus was doing ministry on earth, he was going from Judea to Galilee, which is about 80 miles, or back and forth between these two. He just kept going back and forth, hitting every town and connecting with everybody there. And so he said, okay, it's time for me to go back up north again. And there was three ways he could have went up north, Fred. He could have went on the west side, which is the Mediterranean. He traveled up that way. He could have went on the east side, which is the Jordan River. He could have went that way. Or he could have went through Samaria. And Samaria would be the least likely route because Jews and Samaritans don't get along. Because the Jews looked down on the Samaritans because the Samaritans only thought that the Bible was only these first 5 books. And that was all of God's word, and the rest of the prophets and things weren't God's word. And the Jews had the whole thing. And also the Samaritans were the ones that had intermarried, and so they thought they were better than them. So they didn't get along. Have you ever went through neighborhoods where you thought it might be dangerous and you didn't get along? Anybody? Found yourself in one of those? Okay, me too. So, but Jesus said, no, I need to go through Samaria. And the disciples were going, okay, you need to go through Samaria. Okay, I guess we will. So it says, so he came to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. So there was this famous place where God had given a well to Jacob, and he dug the well. And now Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat down at the well, and it was about the 6th hour. So it was noon. They'd been traveling. They were hot. It was sweaty, and Jesus was tired. And so he sat down. He said, okay, let's take a break. And the disciples are thinking, you want to take a break here? This is a little, and so they said, I'll tell you what, Jesus, we'll go into town and we'll get some food, come back out here, you'll be rested up, we can keep on going out of here, because we're not sure we like it here in Samaria. And so they headed on into the town of Sychar. They were going to get some food. Jesus sat down there, though. And here's what happened next. It was about noon, right? A woman of Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, now, a woman comes to draw water. Now, back in the day, men and women, especially from different places, didn't just start talking to each other. That wasn't right. And Jews didn't start talking to Samaritans. But here's what Jesus did. Jesus said to her, give me a drink. For his disciples had gone into the city to buy food. And so Jesus starts out a conversation with this woman. And let's see. And here's what she said. Then the woman of Samaria said to him, how is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. But here's the thing. I want you to get something before we move on, and that is this. If you want to have an appointment with God, if you want to have something supernatural happening, so it's not just you going through life doing the same thing you always do, then you have to do this thing that Jesus did, because when Jesus did things, he never did anything wrong, right? And so if he did something, we could probably say that's something that we should follow his example at. And what he did was this. He started a conversation with this lady. And so here it is. Are you ready for this? Embrace unscheduled events as though they're supernatural appointments. When you're going along in life and you run into somebody that you normally wouldn't run into, or you have an event where there's somebody in your path, that's not an accident. That didn't just happen. It didn't just happen. Even Jesus, he sat down there and he could have not said anything, but Jesus knew that God God the Father was working all things out. So here was this person. So Jesus knew this is a time for me to take advantage of this connection and consider it a supernatural appointment. If you want to see God, if you want to see the space between heaven and earth bridged, whenever you run into any situation, say, God, what do you want me to do here? I'm going to consider this an appointment that you gave me. So that's in mind. You got it? Okay, so what happened next was Jesus answered and said to her, hey, if you knew the gift of God and who it was that says to you, give me a drink, he said, if you understood who it is that's talking to you, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. The woman said to him, sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where would you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us a well and drank from it himself, as well as his sons and livestock? She said, look, you came here, you weren't even prepared, you don't even have anything to dip down in there, nothing to get water. You're asking me for a drink? And he says to her, if you knew who you were talking to, right now, you would be asking me for a drink. And she's going, what? And so Jesus goes on to explain a little bit here. Jesus answered and said to her, whoever drinks of the water, this water will thirst again, but whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up into everlasting life. The woman said to him, sir, give me this water that I might drink. May not thirst, nor come and draw from this well. Jesus said to her, so she said, okay, give me this water. She still wasn't quite catching on, or at least she thought it was, and you know, the people in Samaria, they did believe in magic, so maybe she even believed there was some kind of magic water, because we see in the book of Acts that in Samaria there was this magician, Simon, and everybody was kind of thinking that he was powerful. And so maybe she actually believed that this was a water that was like the fountain of youth or something like that. And so Jesus goes a little further, and Jesus said to her, he kind of changes the subject a little bit. Jesus said, call your husband and come here. So this woman had went out. I wonder why this woman came out by herself in the middle of the day to get a drink of to get her jug full of water. And I'm thinking it's probably because she didn't want to be associated. She wasn't getting along with the rest of the people in the town, because usually you would come out with somebody else. And so I'm thinking that maybe she had some problems. And as we look at this here, he said, go call your husband. The woman answered, I have no husband. And Jesus said to her, you have said well, I have no husband, for you have 5 husbands, and the one whom you have now is not your husband. And in that you spoke truly. And so Jesus cuts below, and he points out her brokenness. He points out the place that she has need. She had an emptiness that she couldn't fill. She thought, maybe if I have another man and another man and another man, that's going to make me feel better. And you know what? All of us, we start out broken, because we're in a sinful world, and we're sinners, and we're separated from God, and we can't solve that problem ourselves, and all of us need to have that pointed out. And we as believers, we need some way to be able to point that out to people, that they're broken and they need God. And Jesus did it by starting a conversation talking about water, and then he went from water to talk about her and about her need. And so that leads me to the second thing. If you want to be connected, if you want to have that appointment with God as you go through life, besides just realizing that everybody you run into is an unscheduled supernatural appointment, you need to use the circumstances of people's lives to engage in spiritual conversations with them. In this case, she needed some water, so he started talking about water. She also had a brokenness when it came to her relationships with people, and she was trying to fill that herself, and it wasn't working. And so I want you to think about this for a second, because I want you to understand what this means. I call it making lemonade out of lemons, or taking lemons and making lemonade. And what I mean by that is whatever situation, whoever it is you're talking to, whoever you're relating to, I want you to think about what's meaningful to them, and how can I take that and turn that into a spiritual conversation. So, for example, let's say you're talking to a plumber. Let's say you're talking to a plumber, right? And you're trying to figure out how to turn the circumstances there, or the situation there, into a spiritual conversation. I wonder how you do that. Here's what I want you to do. Take 30 seconds to talk to the person next to you, and try to talk to them as though they're a plumber, and how you're going to turn that into a spiritual conversation. You got 30 seconds. Go. Okay, stop. Let me hear. How'd you do it? Did you figure out a way to do it? Anybody got anything? Tell me what you got. Okay, what do you got? Pipes take a lot of garbage out of your house. Okay, that's a euphemism there. And Christ, if he comes into our life, he can take away our brokenness. He can take away our sin. Okay, I got one more before we move on. I'm trying to decide between two because I got two. Okay, but let's pretend you're at a baby shower. A baby shower. You know what a baby shower is? Right? Am I saying that right? That's what they do. Okay, you're at a baby shower. Go. You got to figure out how to do the conversation there. Okay. Eric, just go straight to, just forget about the baby shower. Let's just share the gospel. That's good too. That's all good. Okay. I'm trying to show that Jesus, usually a lot of times, like if he's with some farmers, say, hey, see those plants out there? He starts telling a story, brings it into something spiritual. You see this baby shower right here? You can be born twice. Okay, that's what Nicodemus couldn't figure out. Okay. So second thing is, you know that you're in an appointment ordained by God. Now take whatever is in the person's life. It could be something with their brokenness. It could be something with their occupation, and try and turn that into a spiritual conversation. Let's keep on because we just got a few minutes. Anybody got the time here? What time is that? 55? I got 5 minutes? Okay. Verse 19. The woman said to him, Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped in the mountain, and you say that you worship in Jerusalem is the place where you ought to worship. Jesus said to her, Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We know that we worship for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour is coming, and now is, when a true worshiper will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father is seeking such to worship him. God is spirit, and those that worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. The woman said to him, I know that the Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things. Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am he. He said, I am the Messiah. And so here's something I want you to notice. Ultimately, Jesus turned the conversation. He started the spiritual appointment. He used he connected with this person, what could relate to them in a spiritual conversation. But ultimately, the bottom line is you always got to come to Jesus. Now, Jesus maybe has an easier time coming to Jesus, but we need to say Jesus is the answer too. You always have to come to Jesus because he's the only thing that's going to bridge the gap. So somehow, if God put you in a spiritual appointment, he's going to want you to do something to help that person come a little closer to Jesus. Whether it's just planting, or whether it's watering, or whether it's actually bringing forth fruit, people come to Christ. That's what he wants to happen. And so I want to read this last little section here. And it starts in verse 31. In the meantime, his disciple... Oh, wait a minute. We skipped something. At this point, his disciples came, verse 27, and they marveled that he talked with this woman, yet no one said, What do you seek, or why are you talking to her? The woman then left her water pot, went on her way into the city, and said to the men, Come and see a man who told me all the things that I ever did. Could this be the Christ? They went out of the city and came to him. So she took off, and what did she forget? Her water pot, right? What's the thing she went out there for? Water. What did she come back with? Living water, right? Yeah. And why do you think she was in such a hurry that she just left her water pot there? Why do you think? No, over here. Why? Why would she leave her water pot? Yeah, what she had was more valuable. Now, who was going to say something over there? Was it you, Eric? She knew he was Jesus. She knew he was the Messiah. She started out thinking, this is a Jew, this is a man, this is a rabbi, this is a prophet. No, wait a minute, this is the Messiah. She knew she had something, right? And that something was Jesus. And Jesus, do you think when the disciples got back there with the food that they were going to stay around very long? Just speaking of food, there comes some food. You could just set it down right there. Do you think do you think that the disciples were staying around very long? Probably. So this woman said, I got to get into town. I got to tell you see what happened? Jesus figured out he had a spiritual appointment. And this woman, now that she knew Jesus, she figured out that she had a spiritual appointment. Wait a minute. I got some people in town, and I got just this, this frame of time, this little bit of time to run back to town to get everybody, or Jesus is going to be gone. Right? And so she ran into town, forget the water pot. Maybe if I leave it there, they'll stay around because they think I lost it or something. I got to go into town. She told everybody, and she figured out how to use who she was, because everybody knew who she was. She had a reputation in the town. She said, he told me everything. And when she said he told me everything, they knew that he told her everything, right? And so they said, oh, who is this guy? They all came out. They started coming out. The disciples were going, what's going on here? We don't understand why. We need to get up out of this, out of Oakland. out of Sychar, because it's dangerous here. And so it says, in the meantime, what time is it, by the way? 6 o'clock. That means I got 5 more minutes. Okay. In the meantime, his disciples urged him, saying, Rabbi, eat. But he said to them, I have food to eat which you don't know. Therefore the disciples said to one another, Has he brought him anything to eat? Jesus said to them, My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. Do not say there's still 4 months and then comes the harvest. Behold, I say to you, lift up your eyes and look at the fields, for they are already white with harvest. And probably all these people coming back, he's saying, look up the fields. All those people coming back, they're probably all dressed in white. So he's probably saying, look, he's not only saying, look, the fields are white, but look at these people. They might have been dressed in white, I don't know, but maybe, right? So here they come. He's saying, look at the fields are white to harvest. And he who reaps receives wages and gathers fruit for eternal life. That both he who sows and he who reaps may rejoice together. For this saying is true. One sows, another reaps. I sent you to reap for that which you have not labored. Others have labored, and you have entered into their labors. And many of the people believed. Here's the last point I want you to make, and that is, I want you to understand, Jesus was saying, don't say you got plenty, there's other times I can do this. No, right now is the time for the harvest. Right now is the spiritual appointment. And there was, do you think that this was a time of planting, watering, or reaping? What do you think? Reaping, yeah, they were ready. And you didn't have to wait at all. Sometimes people aren't ready, right? Sometimes you're basically doing some planting. Sometimes you're doing some watering. You're trying to make connections. You're trying to share things. Other times you're doing some reaping. And so what Jesus is saying here is the final thought I have. Adjust your clock to sunlight saving time. Adjust your clock to sunlight saving time. Jesus said, don't say there's 4 months. Right? Because sometimes God's ready to do a harvest right now. Don't say, oh, yeah, it's okay. I can talk later. I'm a little nervous. No, sometimes now is the time. But sometimes later is the time. You know what happened? About 3.5 years later, the disciples actually went back to this Samaria. Jesus said, you're going to go to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria. They went to Samaria because there was persecution. They started going out further. And when they got there, guess what? The pump was already primed. This lady had already been there. People had already started. So when the whole town heard about this, everybody believed. Everybody believed. It was another time for reaping. Jesus said, don't say that there's it could be another time. Adjust your S-O-N, sunlight saving time, right? Because the Son wants to seek and to save the lost, and he might want to do it now. So don't say, okay, another time's the time. No, you got a divine appointment. Every day there's divine appointments. You should be either planting, watering, or reaping, because God set it up for you whenever you have a divine appointment. Second, you got to figure out how to connect with people, right? You got to take them where they're at and bring them to spiritual truth. Both with Nicodemus and with the woman, they started out talking about something concrete. It was about being born with Nicodemus. It was about having water with this woman, and they moved to something spiritual. Jesus says, the Spirit is like the wind. He starts talking about the Spirit. Here, Jesus says, if you're going to worship God, you've got to worship Him in spirit and in truth. So move to the spiritual, and then remember to adjust your clocks. Don't forget to set your clocks to sunlight saving time. Let's stand for prayer, and one more.